Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today is Monday, June 15th. If you watch TechStrong TV regularly, you know that we're on a 3-day-a-week schedule now with new content on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and best of replays on Wednesday and Friday. So today is new content. We have some really good interviews, some fresh news to go over with you. We hope you're going to enjoy it. Of course, you can follow along on TechStrong TV on your TVs using Apple TV or Roku or Amazon Fire, on mobile on the Devops.com app on your iOS or Android device, and that's the Devops.com app on your TV apps as well for Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire, or on the web. You can do Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, I think Twitter Live most days. You can catch it on TechStrong.tv or on digitalanarchist.com or on any of the media ops properties, Devops.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard. They'll all be streaming from there. So lots of places to watch TechStrong TV. Also wanted to announce that we are doing, in conjunction with the RSA conference folks, RSA Conference APJ is going to be virtual, as most conferences are now. And that is, I believe, July 15th, 16th. And we will be hosting a DevSecOps segment for RSA APJ. Very excited by that. Working with my friend Mark Miller from Sonatype and DevSecOps Days and All Day DevOps on that one. And we'll be giving you more information soon. Also, we have some other virtual events coming up in the next couple months and weeks, not even months. A big one on the horizon, though, is the DevOps India Summit that we're partnering on, and we'll be getting you more information on that. And that's really geared for our friends in the India and Asia region. Okay, for today's show, though, what do we have? We have got a bunch of good content. Number one, GitLab announced not one but two acquisitions this week, both in the security scanning fuzzing space as part of, filling out their DevSecOps portfolio. We reported on it over on Devops.com. But I had a chance to catch up with David DeSanto, who product manager for Secure at GitLab, and we go over what the acquisitions were, the products, and how they fit into the GitLab DevSecOps and CI/CD strategy. So that's a good one. And then I also had a chance to catch up with Kevin Dunn. Kevin, of course, is from Tricentis. Came to Tricentis a couple years ago now. And Kevin's involved in the open source projects that Tricentis manages or fosters. And they just did a large survey, really large, on open source testing. Who uses it? Why did they use it? How did they use it? And what some of their feelings were. And, it goes back, if you had a chance to catch my interview with Grigory Melnick from Tricentis a couple weeks ago, people used to view testing as sort of a way station on the way to being a developer, or something to throttle down if you didn't want to work as much as a developer. But that's just not true anymore. First of all, testing is a profession, and most of the people doing testing, as this survey will show you, have been doing testing for 10 plus years. So they're testing professionals, and it's not an easy. Testing's not easy, even with all the automation and continuous kind of testing to speed things up. It requires a lot of skill, training, experience, and we're going to go into that with Kevin. I think you'll find it a good interview. And then we're going to go into something old, again, pulling out from our recent TechStrong conferences. I'm happy to share with you Accelerated Strategy Group's own Sanjeev Sharma, principal analyst there, who gave a great session at TechStrong Con, and it was called your lack of data strategy is killing your digital transformation. It's good. Sanjeev's a great presenter anyway, but he has some good insights here. Definitely do check that out. After Sanjeev, I'll be back with the news. And then from there, turning things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has two interviews for you today. One is with Josh Atwell from Splunk, and one is with Mike Wood at Verissa Networks. Then we have the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, sage words of advice. And then we have a channel roundup with Mike Vizard doing his usual great job there, and it's Sanjay Berry from Netscope. So, and it's going to be about Netscope's partnership with VMware, by the way. Anyway, lots of good stuff on the docket for today. I think you're going to enjoy the show. We're going to take a quick commercial break right now, and we'll be right back with our first guest.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community. Digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Alrighty, ready for our first interview today. As I mentioned, GitLab last week made not one, but two acquisitions. In the middle of COVID and remote, well, they're always remote, but they made two acquisitions. They both, though, are within the same space, and they involve security testing using technology we call fuzzing. And our guests will explain a little bit about what fuzzing is if you don't know. But they, it certainly gives GitLab a critical mass of expertise around fuzzing, helps fill out their vision for a DevSecOps strategy here. So let's now go to David DeSanto, Product Manager for Secure at GitLab. And we're going to talk about the two fuzzing acquisitions and GitLab's DevSecOps strategy. So here's David DeSanto.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, got a good segment coming up next here for you on TechStrong TV. I'm joined by David DeSanto, who's the Director of Product Management for Secure and Defend at GitLab. Hey David, how are you? And welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks, doing good. How are you doing and holding up with COVID-19?
I'm healthy, I think, right now. So, I'm in that regard, I guess all well.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I hope the same with you. We're down in Florida, David, and I think we've had like 10,000 new cases in the last 8 days or something like that. So people are not wearing masks, not socially distancing, and not doing what they're supposed to do. And I hope things start getting better here quicker. But anyway, I didn't want to go off on that tangent on this interview. Sounds like you guys have been busy over at GitLab, huh? COVID or not?
Very busy, yeah. I mean, on the COVID front, we were already all remote, which you and I talked about in a previous call. So
sure.
For us, the biggest change has been, our kids home, our, spouses, partners, whatever. But yeah, I mean, outside of all that, we've been very busy. We've been focused on expanding our DevSecOps offering, which is our secure stage, to include more testing capabilities than we offered previously. And the big thing I wanted to talk to you about is that we've actually made two acquisitions to help expand our portfolio and help our users be able to test deeper and find issues faster.
Absolutely. Well, I knew something was up when we had a GitLab interview, not around the 22nd of the month, because usually our GitLab interviews are around the 22nd with the monthly release. So I said, something's cooking, and sure enough, we got news, of course, of not one but two acquisitions in the DevSecOps space. David, why don't you, if you don't mind, preview for our audience both of these acquisitions, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, so on June 11th, which is a Thursday, we've announced our acquisition of two leading security testing companies. The first is Fuzzer. They are focused on coverage-guided fuzz testing, and that would be fuzzing that is able to see the source code, and you're able then to build out fuzz unit tests around different functions and whatnot, and essentially test without the application having to run. The other company we acquired is Peach Tech, and they've been focused on traditional fuzzing, we'll call it the behavioral-based fuzzing, where there's the application's up and running, you don't have access to source code, you can only interact with it like a normal user would as well. And on the Peach side, it includes two products. It's actually their API security product, where we'll be able to do DAS-based testing against REST APIs, as well as their protocol Fuzzer, which has been an industry-leading product for the last 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. So, David, I'm going to ask you to just do a little foundational work here with me, if you don't mind. You know, our audience is kind of funny. We have DevOps, cybersecurity, cloud native. You say fuzzing, and I've been following fuzzing since Black Hat. It may be 2007. 2006, I think, might have been the first time I heard the term. But some people in our audience, the whole idea of fuzzing may be new to them. So let's start with what is fuzzing, and then we'll talk about DAS, dynamic type scanning, and then we'll compare and contrast the two different. There's actually 3 different products among the two companies here. Right? Or 3 different capabilities, let's call them, among the two companies, and we'll get into that. So if you don't mind, Professor David, have at it.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, fuzz testing has been around for a very long time. For the longest time, it was considered like a dark art that a hacker would use to try to find a vulnerability in your product. And that's when you started seeing it pop up at like the Black Hats and the DEF CON type conferences 15, 20 years ago. But in the last several years, there's been a move to make fuzz testing approachable, not only just for a security tester, but for a developer. And what fuzz testing is doing is it's inputting malformed or improper input into an application, a service, a function, to see the stability and reliability of that component. And what fuzz testing is trying to do is find a system fault or some sort of crash of a service. And that allows an attacker to be able to identify, hey, there's a boundary problem there, or there's a rounding error, whatever the case is. And they could potentially take advantage of that and inject shell code and get remote access to that system. So when I try to describe fuzzing to people, I say, the SAST, DAS type products of the world, those are finding known vulnerabilities. Fuzzing's focused on finding the unknown vulnerability that is within your product. And so it's very exciting to be able to offer our users the ability to run those traditional tried and true security tools like a SAST or a DAS, defense scanning, but also begin to allow them to go into that area that we've not made available readily in our commercial product, or a lot of security companies are not offering both halves of that. So it's very exciting for our users to be able to have that in their toolkit as they test their products.
Absolutely. And just to reinforce, so traditional vulnerability scanning and even pen test kind of scanning and stuff, it would look, you have your CVE list of known vulnerabilities, and so it would run scans or tests probing against those known vulnerabilities, right? We know that Linux version so with this distribution package, the SSH has this vulnerability in it, and we're going to make sure that you're not running that version of SSH and we can't poke through. With fuzzing, I don't want to use the term 0 days because that gets overused and nonsensical too, but it's looking for unknown vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I generally don't go to the 0 day because 0 day has a very specific connotation. So I agree with you on that. But yeah, I refer to them as unknown vulnerabilities because there could be something wrong in one of your functions. You're trying to maybe add two numbers together, or you're inadvertently adding a number and a string together, which doesn't work. That doesn't mean that there's definitely a vulnerability there, but it's definitely there's a software defect there. And if that's within your application and it's not, say, a library you're getting from Apache or Nginx for your web server, it's something you wrote, that might not have a CV identified for it. It's a brand new area, a new software defect that exists in your application. And so
Fair.
it's definitely unknown. Not saying that fuzzing can't find 0 days, because as you mentioned at the beginning, the original people using fuzzing back in the day, they were trying to find 0 day vulnerabilities. But it's not like it's a magic bullet that all of a sudden you have all these 0 days. It's meant to find software defects, instability, things that could be exploited.
Yep. And then, of course, you mentioned SAST and DAST. SAST is a static kind of code analysis, if you will, testing, dynamic code analysis, DAST testing. Got that out of the way. Now, let's talk about the three different kinds of fuzz testing that you guys picked up here with these two acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of use the SAST and DAST as the example here. So the first company, Fuzzit, they're focused on what's called coverage-guided fuzzing. It's very akin to what a SAST product is doing, that static analysis. It has access to source code, and it's going through the source code and trying to find an instability or a place that's broken. SAST would be finding a known vulnerability, like, hey, this line of code is not written to sanitize an input, and you have a SQL injection. The opposite side of this with the technology from Fuzzit, they're going to tell you that there's a crash with that function. And then from there, they can actually deduplicate crashes and help with event correlation and say to you, here's the part that's broken that you need to fix. The other acquisition of Peach, they're bringing in two products, as you just mentioned. The first is the API security product. It does two unique things that we're very excited about. The first is it provides DAST APIs, so that dynamic scanning that you would do with a DAST product where you're looking for web vulnerabilities. It does that over REST APIs. And so you can then identify, is there a possible SQL injection, credential stealing, or whatever with that API. That API security product also does fuzzing of APIs. So it goes back to throwing malformed, unexpected input into that API to do that same sort of looking for a system crash like fuzzing would do as well. The second product of theirs is called Peach Fuzzer. It's a protocol fuzzer, and it's designed to fuzz protocols across the entire gamut. It's got everything from traditional TCP, UDP, HTTP. But the company also made its name known for being able to fuzz things within automotive, within healthcare. And we're very excited to bring that in as well, because we have customers today who are in the automotive space, they're in healthcare, they're in finance, and they're implementing their own versions of these protocols, or they're adding stuff on top of these protocols. And this is going to give them a way to make sure that those things are working exactly as they expect before they move them to production, or in the case of a car, they ship the car out to dealers to be sold. So to your comment, we're covering both sides of fuzzing, both the static analysis type style, that coverage guided, as well as that dynamic kind of one that is behavioral. It's based on, I send you a malformed input, you respond, I look at that and decide, did I cause instability? What should I send next? And so very, very exciting to be able to bring both of those into this secure portfolio.
Yeah, no, it's really tying a nice bow on it. And just, I want to emphasize too how important the whole idea about API fuzzing is, right? Because today where so many applications interact with other applications, or components interact with each other via API, and even like look like a Kubernetes stack, if you will, right? There's this whole API gateway of how Kubernetes interacts, whether it be via the mesh or whatever, right? Being able to test that API, those APIs for unknown vulnerabilities, let's call them that, or unknown potential instabilities. critical stuff. The other thing is, you mentioned automotive. We're not talking necessarily about autonomous vehicle. Like, people start thinking of computers and computer. Today's Jaguar. I remember seeing this. I think maybe it might have been a Gene Kim DevOps Enterprise Summit. Guy from Jaguar. Just the front suspension system on the Jaguar has, I forget how many millions of lines of code in it. Right?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Just right, to that independent suspension and stuff. So, today's vehicles are, they're technology with some metal wrapped around them. Like, a lot of people said that about the Tesla. It's a battery with a car wrapped around it. Yeah. Today's automobiles are computers with a car wrapped around them.
Yeah, I think you can't stress it enough that just take a car that you've purchased in the last couple of years. There is a whole automotive Ethernet running inside that car where that system is deciding what to prioritize. Is it putting the next video frame up, or is it applying your brakes when you press the brake pedal? Is it automatically turning on the headlights, or is it prioritizing media streaming going out to the stereo? And that's that automotive Ethernet. People also talk about CAN bus, but those are things that today in today's car, it's not a future thing. It's not, as you said, autonomous vehicles. It's what car do you have today? And even my car, 5-6 years old at this point, probably 6 to 7 years old. But if it's directly into that story, my dash is a computer. It's not traditional dials. I have a GPS system. All that stuff is, as you said, millions of lines of code, and that's what you're helping people test. To go back to your point about APIs, I can't stress the API part of that enough. We talked about it briefly in our conversation around RSA, the importance of API testing. And for us, we're an API company as well. People use our APIs to integrate in all the other services they want to use around DevOps. And that's just really not a heavily focused and tested area of people's products. There's just an assumption that it's an API, so it should be fine. But a lot of companies who build API first products, like the Facebooks, the Googles of the world, they're talking the same API you would call if you were doing an integration. And those APIs are very important to make sure they're secure, they're sanitizing input, and all the other things that an API needs to do, as you said, to talk between, say, Kubernetes and an instrumented services running your Kubernetes, your management interface. Maybe you're using like a Mirantis or whatever to manage your Kubernetes environment. Like, those things are all talking over API, and it just needs to be tested better.
Agreed. I mean, you can't, and frankly, that was why I brought it up. But so, David, I got to ask you a silly question. COVID, everyone working from home. You guys are remote anyway, so that didn't affect you. But how the heck do you pull off two acquisitions in the middle of all this? Were they done over Zoom? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, acquisitions take time, so some of that stuff may have started before COVID-19, but
I got it.
Yeah, to your point, I think that we were truly, this was worked out really well. In the case of Fuzzer, they were already remote as their company, so for them it's not been a big transition. And the Peach team, they're phenomenal. A lot of them have been around for a very long time in the industry, and they were, I'm sure, used to traveling and whatnot. But to your point, GitLab being all remote, it makes these sort of conversations easier in times like this, because if it was a place where GitLab had to go into the office, a lot of companies' offices are still shut. If it was a thing where we had to get them to come to our office because they're now acquired, like, same thing would happen again. But that all remote culture has really been key to making these successful in these times that are unknown with COVID and all the protesting, rightfully so, around everything that's going on in the world. So yeah, it just worked out really well, Alan, that we're all remote. We can support them in being all remote.
Fantastic. All right. Now, David, look, GitLab's made a series of acquisitions in the DevSecOps place, but also organically, you guys continue to add 22nd of every month, right? You continue to add functionality around DevSecOps. Of course, these acquisitions, aren't meant to be the end-all, be-all. right, for GitLab in terms of DevSecOps.
Yeah, this is the next major step we're taking in our evolution, but we have a very aggressive roadmap between now and the next 2 or 3 years. Our direction pages, if you go to our website, you can click on secure, you'll see the secure direction. There's some of the things that we've just done recently that are worth highlighting. We now support running all of our security scans in an air-gapped environment, which is big for financial and governments around the world. We are getting ready to bring our Rails SaaS scanner down to our free level to enable community-driven projects to be able to test and make sure their code is safe. And I would say the other one that was very exciting is that we now have historical scan support for our secret detection. And so those are 3 things that are either happening this month or just happened. And that's outside of the acquisitions that we're talking about today. And so, yeah, wow. I would say that we are very aggressive at making sure we're meeting our customers' needs for the security testing, whether that is, again, that stack analysis, dynamic analysis, software composition analysis, now fuzz testing. And we definitely plan on continuing to drive forward. Our goal is to be looked at as an application security testing leader. And we were just highlighted in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for that space. Actually, since the last time I spoke to you. And that's validation that we're doing the right thing, we're moving forward, and we're helping everybody be more secure.
Excellent, and congratulations on that as well, David. Good stuff, man.
Yeah, we've only been at it for a little over 2 years, and being recognized in that capacity is a great achievement for a company. GitLab's much older than that, but obviously the security stuff is very new.
I mean, what was it? The first acquisition was Philip's company, right?
Yeah, it was Gymnasium for dependency.
Gymnasium.
Yep.
Yeah, and that had to be about 2 years ago. Maybe
I think it was a little over 2 years ago. But yeah, to your point, we're looking at it, how do we meet our users' needs, whether that is acquisition, like Peach and Fuzzer, Gymnasium, is it leveraging open source, which we talked a little bit about during the RSA conversation, or is it things built internally? And you can see that both when we release tools like Token Hunter, which is a secret detection tool, whether it's, we are building something that's GitLab intellectually, team built. And examples of that is some of the great improvements we're making to our SaaS scanning, that stack analysis, or it's that acquisition. So we're wanting to make sure we're meeting our users' needs, and we're choosing the best path to do that as we make each decision.
Excellent, man. David, we're we probably overtime, but hey, first of all, congratulations on the 2 acquisitions. Sounds like they're really going to fit in real nice, round out this DevSecOps testing application security testing functionality as part of GitLab. Congratulations on the Gartner Magic Quadrant inclusion again. And keep us posted. We'll hopefully have you back soon to talk more security.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I definitely look forward to our next conversation. Maybe we'll do it again in a couple of months.
Oh, maybe even before then, David. We'll see.
I would talk to you as
the
much
way
as
you guys buy, we're doing. You always have an open invitation here, David. Don't be careful what you wish for. Anyway, hey, David DeSanto, Director of Product Management, Secure and Defend GitLab, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hey everyone, back for our next interview. As I mentioned, Kevin Dunn wears multiple hats at Tricentis. But one of those is around the open source testing portfolio. And Tricentis just did a pretty massive survey of folks around open source testing tools, around testing in general, talking about skill levels, experience of the folks doing testing. What do they look for in testing tools? What are their thoughts on are testing tools hard or open source harder versus not? And really some great information. Kevin shares a lot of it with us, and I actually had a lot of fun doing this with Kevin because he got to do the kind of the play-by-play and the results, and I got to add a little color commentary. So it was a great interview. I enjoyed it. I hope you will too. Here I am talking with Kevin Dunn now of Tricentis.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. My guest today is Kevin Dunn of Tricentis. Of course, Tricentis, worldwide leader in continuous automated testing, bringing speed to the whole DevOps lifecycle, or to the whole DevOps software development cycle, CI/CD. Kevin, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, we actually love having you here. So, Kevin, first of all, well, we should start. What's your position with Tricentis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm the general manager of test projects, so that's sort of my day-to-day is running that business unit, which is a free product and built on open source technologies, which we'll obviously be talking a bit about today. So that's what keeps me busy. I also am involved in our strategic initiatives, so also taking a look out there in the field for any new and exciting technologies that we might be able to acquire and further strengthen the Tricentis portfolio.
Excellent, and quite a portfolio it is, right? I mean,
yeah.
Our audience is familiar with Tricentis, and we often speak to folks from Tricentis here. But I mean, for people who are listening who maybe aren't familiar for whatever reason with Tricentis, of course, you guys have been around now. We started in Austria. It's got to be, what, 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah, even longer
Maybe
than
more?
that. Wolfgang, who is Wolfgang Platz, who's the
CTO.
founder of Tricentis, he started almost 20 years ago. So there's a
Wow.
lot of folks who have been there since the very beginning. I myself, I came from QA Symphony. So about
That's
3
right.
years ago, 2-3 years ago, we merged Tricentis and QA Symphony together. So I had been at QA Symphony since about 2013. So we got started there about 7 years ago. So, together a lot of experience there, and it's quite a large company now. We've got over 700 people around the world. And like you said, we had a strong presence in Austria from the beginning, but we've got offices in Atlanta and San Francisco and Australia, Singapore. So really growing quite a bit.
It's worldwide.
Yeah.
But and not to beat the dead horse, but here's the bottom line. Tricentis is the worldwide leader right now in the continuous testing space, DevOps kind of testing that we see. And I think people need to recognize that if they haven't. But Kevin, that's not why we're here today, right? We're here to talk about a survey Tricentis recently published some findings on, and some good insight in there. What's it about?
Absolutely. So it's the first survey that we've run on this topic. It's called the State of Open Source Testing. So we really brought together 3 different communities that we have here. One being Test Project, which is the one that I'm responsible for. We also have a product called SpecFlow, which we acquired earlier in the year that does BDD testing. And we have also Flood, which is a load and performance testing platform that works with a lot of the most popular open source tools there, like JMeter, et cetera. So we brought together those 3 communities and wanted to basically run a survey across all different types of open source testing. So we did some functional testing from the Test Project side of things. We did BDD testing on the SpecFlow side of things, and then performance and load testing on the Flood side of things. So overall, we got about 1,800 full responses to the survey. So as far as we know, it's the biggest testing survey of the year so far, and specifically focused just on open source tools, which is kind of neat. We don't think that something like that's been done before, and we thought the timing was interesting. We obviously planned this out earlier in the year, but with everything going on in the economy right now, free and open source tools are gaining more popularity than ever before. So I think the timing was just really great to have something like this hit the market.
Absolutely. And I mean, but to be fair, look, the open source market in general, open source testing, has been thriving for as long as I've been involved in DevOps, which is probably about 7-8 years now, and in my time in security before then. So, I mean, certainly with the whole COVID thing, maybe people are looking for less expensive solutions. Though when you talk about open source, there's the total cost of ownership, but it's also how well can I do it in a distributed team. We were lucky. We had Grigory Melnik from Tricenters on a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how his own team working remote, and some of the changes and ways they're doing that really kind of make it as efficient as possible, maybe more efficient than before. So we're seeing that too. But talk to us. What the surveys show? Not to sound like Richard Dawson.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of interesting findings there. We've got an infographic out on our site. We've had about 10,000 people in the first 2 weeks come and read that report. So it's getting a lot of traction out there. Certainly worth checking out. But yeah, to your point about distributed testing, I think one of the most interesting findings that we saw is, there's been a lot of talk over the years about how you can't succeed in agile development with sort of teams that aren't co-located, right? And so a lot of people were predicting that there would be sort of a fall in the support for offshore testing. And what we saw is actually that really isn't the case. At least in our survey, the audience that we reached, we saw that 61% of the respondents to the survey were actually from somewhere in Asia, and most of that 61% was in India. So I think to your point, we're seeing a lot of tools, not just the testing tools, but tools like Jira, tools like Slack, allowing people to continue to do agile development, because we know agile is not dead, right? If anything, that's continuing to accelerate, right? But they're allowing the teams to actually be able to succeed without being in the same location physically, and it's something that we'll probably have to be ready for in the future, right? Because none of us are really working in the same location today. So I think this is a positive finding, but one that sort of goes against the grain of a lot of things that you hear about how you can't really succeed if you have people located in different locations around the globe just because of time zones and communication, collaboration, and whatnot.
You know what? I think that's been one of the, I don't know if that's the right word. But I was going to say, it's been one of the pleasant surprises about this whole situation. I don't know if anything is pleasant about it, but the fact is that a lot of companies have been able to really rock and roll with just total remote and totally distributed, right, from worldwide, and the internet's kind of functioned as advertised, and tools like Slack and Zoom, but it's beyond those collaboration tools, Kevin, because collaboration tools are great, but ultimately, like in the case of open source testing tools, those open source testing tools have to lend themselves to people not all being on the same Ethernet, on the same LAN, if you will, or within close proximity of each other. So I think it goes, to that as well. So that's a great, it's a great finding. What are some of the other findings that you think that are really interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think another one that we saw as well, which Grigory talked a bit about, was just the overall experience of a lot of the testers in the field, right? I think that's another, I would say, maybe misconception that people have is, well, if you're a tester, it's just kind of an interim job to get you to developer or get you to test manager or something like that, right? But we saw that actually the average tenure of the person that we were talking to for the survey was about 10 years. And we actually had 14% of the respondents of the survey say they had been working for 15 years or more in the testing field specifically. So I think that was really neat to see. I think some of that might be intertwined with the open source tools, right? Because as people adopt open source tools, those are inherently more complex. And one of the other findings we saw is that the most difficult or aspect of, or one of the drawbacks to adopting open source tools, was just the technical skills required. We saw that that was the number one blocker for folks that said that they were not successful implementing open source tools. It was that they couldn't get the technical skills that they needed to be successful. So maybe there's some correlation there, right? That as people are adopting more and more open source tools, the value of people with experience goes up, and maybe that, tester role, which maybe used to look like a more junior role that wasn't that technical, didn't require that much experience, is actually changing into something that looks a lot more like a development role and requires more experience, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something there, Kevin. I think one, and this has nothing to do with the COVID situation. I think we've seen the rise of a professional testing class.
Right.
Of professionals, a class of professionals who are testers by trade. And it's not a way station on the way to the, it's like Dante's Inferno. It's not one of the levels of going to hell. There are people who do testing for a living for their whole careers. And, and I, quite frankly, I don't know if open source testing is necessarily per se harder than, let's say, a commercial testing solution, unless you're talking about a service, right? That's a different story. I think the key difference is that a lot of the commercially available, COTS solutions probably do a better job of including training, right? Because think about the average sort of open source path, right, of a tester. He hears about this really great tool. He goes on GitHub or to the projects page. He downloads it. He starts playing with it. Maybe he reads some FAQs. He has some community questions. But, where when you buy a COTS solution, oftentimes they'll wrap training around your purchase of that license, and maybe that's one of the, I'd be interested maybe if you do another survey on this, what kind of training people who are really doing it. Is it mostly self-taught people, or look, I'm one of the founders of the Devops Institute. Maybe we need to start getting some open source testing training out there or something, or maybe that's something Tricentis does.
Well, yeah, I think you're onto something there. That was sort of the second barrier to adoption, right? Behind technical skills was actually customer support as well, right? So I think, that's certainly for those that weren't successful. It's not actually the tool itself that made them fail. It was the implementation, training, and support. But on the flip side, what was interesting was, of the people who stated that they had good success with open source testing, obviously cost, especially in this environment, was sort of the biggest benefit that they saw. But actually the second biggest benefit of those that saw success was the community support. So it kind of cuts, both. You can say it's a pro or a con, right? Some people love it, some people hate it. But it's certainly, we found that, open source tools, right, they're not for everyone or not for every use case. And where you had skilled users who wanted sort of an interactive community rather than that sort of off-the-shelf training and support, they loved it. And when people weren't expecting that, obviously they had a lot of challenges. So.
Yeah, and that transcends the open source testing. I think that is true for all open source software, whether we're talking cloud native or what have you. What other good stuff did the survey show us, Kevin?
Well, I think one of the big ones that we had heard a lot about, and I'm sure you've heard about, is sort of this idea of the developer being responsible for creating automated tests, and that, potentially, back to what we were talking about earlier with the sort of class of testers, that might be going away, because developers can use these scripted open source tools, and they'll be able to write tests, and so we'll just tell them, you need to write the tests, and then we won't need testers, right? And what we found was, that sounds nice, but 84% of companies still have dedicated testers. Only 8% of companies actually have developers writing functional tests. So I think that, while it sounds nice in theory, what we know is time is limited. we saw that in other questions as well. We asked people what was the biggest kind of blocker in terms of getting higher functional test coverage, and they said that it was just time, right? So I think that because of that trend, and because of the fact that time is of the essence and developers are already overworked, I personally don't believe that we're going to see that trend, towards developers getting rid of testers or limiting the role of testers anytime soon. If anything, I think we're seeing that as DevOps kind of accelerates and developers are required to be on call throughout the day, deal with various different issues, environment issues, things like that. The last thing they want to be doing, or last thing they have time to be doing, is learning testing
Writing
tools
tests.
and writing tests, right?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of fallacies that exposes this stat you brought up. Number one, yes, I think it's a great noble goal that we can totally automate testing.
Right.
It's not going to happen. We can automate more and more of it, but what we can automate is the mundane, the regular, and it frees up our testers, our tester professionals, to do the less mundane, the less repeatable, the corner cases, the harder things, the things that require maybe more analytics and frankly human intelligence. So number one, you're never going to replace that. Number two, if you want to say, I'm going to replace the testers by having developers do it, right? God bless you. You must have a lot of developers sitting idly by, right, to be writing test stuff, even if they know how, right? Is that really the best use of their time as well? Because then why, if they're writing tests, why call them developers? They're testers, right? And so I don't care what you call them, late for dinner or whatever, but if someone spends a lot of their time writing tests, they're testers, right? And I think that bears it out.
Yeah,
I think that's what we see there.
But we did see one thing that's interesting is that we are seeing a rise, and we'll look forward to doing another survey next year to kind of benchmark the change year over year. But this idea of the software development engineer and test, or the SDET, that is something that's been around for a while. I think at Microsoft they've had those for 10, 20 years, but it's an emerging trend. We saw that actually it was 14% of the people who filled out our survey considered themselves that. Yeah, so I think there's some room for this kind of emerging. They're focused only on testing, right? But they are they consider themselves a technical tester, and it might not only be creating automated tests, but also one of the big challenges we saw was managing test environments. Like the actual environment of your application that you test on. A lot of times those SDETs might be responsible for that. And that is becoming one of the big blockers. I think with cloud adoption, we would hope to see that go down. But I think what we're seeing is that, the more and more complex a lot of these applications are becoming, the harder it is to actually create an environment where you can test them accurately as a customer would use them, right?
Yeah. That's so people. What would you say was 14%? Was the number there?
14% of people said they were specifically a software development engineer in tests, which we kind of interpret that as they don't write any code for the application, right? They're not writing code that would.
Right. So they're not traditional dev.
Right. They're devs that are focused just on either writing coded tests, maintaining the test framework, which is a big source of a lot of investment from people when using open source tools, and then managing test environments a lot of times as well.
So if I held your feet to the fire, Kevin, would you consider those people testing professionals?
I think so, yeah. And it's interesting because I think what it's showing is that people can kind of take an engineering background and be interested enough in testing and see enough of like a future career in testing to focus their attention there, right? Usually it was you only would go into the testing domain because you didn't have the technical skills, right? And you were sort of forced to do that. But now it's, these are people who a lot of times are graduating, a 4-year college with a computer science degree, and they're applying that towards building test frameworks, building automated tests, et cetera. So I think for me, I would say they're definitely testers. And not only that, for me, it kind of shows that this is a worthwhile profession, right? That, even people with a lot of training are looking to get into and jump into as a full-time career.
No doubt. I agree 100%. And here's another, I think, a lesson out of that one. Sorry, Kevin, you're playing like I'm the color commentary guy and you're the play-by-play in this one. I apologize.
Love
it. Something that I see when I look at that is that, as I said, we all want to move to more and more automated testing. And to do that automated testing stuff, we need to set up these frameworks. And it's more than just writing a script. Right, to kick off some tests. You've got to frame it right. You got to position. You got to know what test you're looking for. There's a lot of work that goes into that. Right. Maybe more work than just running the test manually in some cases. But the idea is that, over time, that automation, you get scale, right? But it's not easy doing that. And it does take a lot of skills. And it may be coding skills in fact, but or typical sort of dev skills. But to set these environments up, to maintain them, to update them, to tweak them, it's not it's a pro's job. It's not for an amateur to just come in and think he's going to do that.
Right. Yep. So that's kind of where, I think as Tricentis, we offer solutions that are, both free and open source, as well as obviously commercial and off the shelf. And so I think this survey has been really helpful for us in engaging with customers, right? Because we talk to thousands of customers, and really it helps us to build kind of a workflow or just a flow chart to figure out what tools are going to be best fit for that customer, right? I mean, just to get started, open source tools really only cover a small portion of applications that you can test, right? They're not going to test your SAP mainframe applications. It's usually kind of the modern applications like
cloud native stuff.
Yeah, cloud, web, API, those types of things. But, assuming that you are testing a web app or a mobile app where you could use either open source or off the shelf, then we're finding, these survey responses to be very helpful, because really the conversation we need to have with test managers is just really around personnel, right? How many people do you have? Do you have the people of the right skill level to use these open source tools? And do you have enough time on their calendar to get these things set up yourself, go through documentation, etc.? And also, what are your expectations around the tool, right? If you're going to expect that when the tool goes down, you can call someone and, they're going to pick up the phone and help you get it back up. That's not the case with an open source tool, right? So are you going to have a team of people who can manage for that and deal with that? So I think that's really what, we're gaining out of it as one of the biggest benefits. Is it really helps us in these survey findings and predicting, will customers be successful with open source, and should they try it or not? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we offer both open source and commercial solutions, right? So we're just trying to help them, quickly.
Kevin, it's not just a. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback, but people shouldn't use open source just because it's open source, right? They should use the best tools for the job that make the most sense economically, functionality-wise, everything else. And I think the other thing, and Tricentis is really well positioned for it, is you can have sort of a hybrid, right? For these things, I use open source. For these things, I'll use a commercial solution. And you meld together a complete test strategy and a suite of what your tools are. You shouldn't pigeonhole yourself into just using open source tools or not using open source tools, right? You use the best tools. Anyway, hey man, we're almost out of time. Is there any other key findings in the survey that we think you want to share?
I think, just wrap up with the last one in terms of anyone out there who's looking to get into the testing field and maybe start a career down the SDET path. We did have pretty interesting findings, which I would say do vary by geography, about what languages are most popular to know. And Java was definitely the biggest one. We saw that 2/3 of companies use Java, which is not a surprise. But what was surprising was that JavaScript was the number 2, Python the number 3, and then C# and .NET was number 4. But that does vary by region. So I would say in Europe, you'll find that C# is actually the number 2 behind Java.
Really?
And more popular. Yeah, so it does vary by region, but overall, I think, making an investment in Java, JavaScript, or Python is definitely one that would, have a payback for you. So.
Very cool. I didn't realize that. I guess Europe's more heavily Microsoft. But anyway, hey, Kevin, this is fantastic. For people who want to download the survey, I know you said something like 10,000 people have downloaded it already. From the Tricentis main page, or is there a particular section they should go to?
Yeah, we can maybe share the link out with your audience in some way.
Sure.
But it's tricentis.com/state of open source 2020 is the link, and it's just it's an interactive infographic, so you don't have to put your email in or anything. Just can go straight to the page and check out the findings.
I love it. All right, man. Hey, Kevin Dunn here from Tricentis. Kevin, thanks for being our guest on TechStrong TV. It's a pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
Yes, likewise.
Hey. All right. Hey, stay safe and stay well. This is Alan Schimmel on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Hi, Mitch Ashley here, coming to you with another webinar roundup. This one for the week of June 15th, and it's jam-packed. On Monday, June 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern, hear from a panel of experts on how your organization can successfully integrate DevOps to accelerate your digital transformation strategy. It's what it's all about these days, right? Then on Wednesday, June 17th, 1 p.m. Eastern, join leaders at JFrog to learn best practices to future-proof your DevOps strategy and remain relevant in the face of massive technology upheaval. Ooh. Lastly, digital experience is everything. And on Thursday, June 18th, 1 p.m. Eastern, experts from Observium and App Dynamics are going to discuss how we build, ship, and support apps to deliver a great digital experience. So join us for our great digital experience about digital experience. Have a great week.
Okay, for our something old segment today, it's not that old, we're just going back to 2 weeks ago to TechStrong Con, which we'll be replaying a lot of the speakers from over the next weeks. Today's segment was actually delivered by Accelerated Strategy Group's own principal analyst, Sanjeev Sharma. And Sanjeev's talk was on your lack of data strategy is killing your digital transformation. And it was a bit of a little Star Wars there. But anyway, I love watching Sanjeev present. He's smart, he's witty, but he also, he really just gets the points across. So here's Sanjeev Sharma from TechStrong Con on your lack of data strategy is killing your digital transformation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my session. My name is Sanjeev Sharma from Accelerated Strategies. I'm a principal analyst here. And today I'm going to be talking about a very interesting topic, how your data strategy, or quite frankly, the lack of a data strategy, is killing digital transformations in large enterprises. This is something I've been seeing over and over for years. And here are some of my thoughts from my experiences. So let's roll. So what are we talking about here, right? So, let me start by doing some introduction, right? For some of you who might not know me, I've been in the DevOps space for a long time, written a couple of books on it. So what better way to start a presentation than making a shameless plug for my books? I wrote the DevOps for Dummies. This is a small booklet when I was at IBM. It's still available as a free download at ibm.com. And then 2 years ago, I wrote the DevOps Adoption Playbook, which is available wherever books are sold. So, and I have a blog where I talk about whatever topic seems to be interesting that day. So I'm moving on from the shameless plug. Let's talk about digital transformation and data. Digital transformation has kind of become the buzzword, right? But it's actually more than a buzzword, right? There's an IDC study I was looking at from exactly a year ago, May 2019, and it said $22 trillion being spent in 2019 across digital transformation, right? And which is crazy, right? I mean, and even if I'm reading this wrong and it says 2 trillion is the entire technology spending and 40% is going to be spent on digital transformation, that's still a lot of money. But if you read the rest of the quotes I have here from various articles and studies I've seen, most of them seem to be saying that the digital transformation is not working. Or if it's working, it's not giving them the kind of results they are expecting. There's a Harvard Business study from around a few months ago, a year ago. It said 70% of all digital transformation initiatives do not reach their goals. Well, that's scary, right? And this is not something new. It's been going on for a while. And the McKinsey study is even worse, which says that the results being shown are getting worse, not better, according to their research, right? And all of this is a bit scary. So things are not well in the digital transformation land. So what's common? What's common across all of these, right? And there are many definitions of digital transformation, right? I mean, the more studies and blog posts one looks at and research papers one looks at, the more various combinations on definitions of digital transformation one finds. But digital transformation tends to focus in 3 different areas from a business perspective. You're either trying to digitize and improve your customer experience and your operational processes and look for new business models. At the end of the day, that is a good summary of the goals most digital transformation efforts are trying to achieve. From the technology side, the way you adopt these, the way you get on that journey of digital transformation is by doing application modernization, getting off those legacy systems to new, modern, more lean and agile systems, adopting the cloud. That's become a pathway to digital transformation because now you have access to all the cloud services and the agility and the elasticity and the compute power and the reach which cloud brings you. And of late, there's been the whole focus on data science and AI and machine learning, which allows you to do something with all the data you have. As you are digitizing, you're actually getting more data. And how do you get insights from that data, right? It all comes from the data science and the AI and machine learning efforts one is hearing about and which companies are embarking upon. What is common across all 6 of these, whether you look at it from the business axis or from the technology axis, the common factor, in my opinion, is data. And the common stumbling block is also data. And here's some other quotes I have, which I found while having conversations with clients or talking to other organizations which were looking into the same area. Here's Rob Roy from Sprint, the Chief Data Officer of Sprint, saying, getting better data is key to eliminating the unknowns of digital transformation. He's not talking about the data which the digital transformation will impact. He's talking about the data you need to know in order to do digital transformation. So, it's kind of a inception style recursive thing here. But at the end of the day, it's data. Here's a quote from from Arvind Krishna, who's now the CEO of IBM. But when this quote came out, which was around a year ago, he was the senior vice president running cloud and cognitive at IBM. So that was pretty much the bottom layer from IBM, right? On my graphic here, application modernization, cloud adoption, and data science, AI, machine learning. He owned it. And here is a statement he made during an interview with the Wall Street Journal. And I highly encourage you to go read the whole article because there's much more to it than this soundbite I've put here. And he was being asked why all these AI projects, which IBM had been involved in since the origins of Watson, why were they halting or being canceled? And he was being challenged on that. And he said, it's data-related challenges is the number one reason. Now that's painting it with a very broad brush. What data-related challenges, right? And I'll talk about my opinion of those. And kind of it is painted a little bit by what Arvind talked about. But I think it's also just one side of the coin. Saying data-related challenges seems to imply it's a technology challenge. In my opinion, it's more than technology. It's actually a cultural challenge about how most large enterprises treat data and how they don't have an enterprise strategy on how to treat data like a true product. And here's a recent one. Actually, I was just reading the current issue of The Economist, And they were talking about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. We are recording this, obviously, having this in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And essentially what they are observing is that all these data-enabled services are even in more aspects of our life, right? Students, like my daughter and son who used to go to school and college, they're doing it online. And there's more and more data being gathered and analyzed about what they are doing and not doing than it ever used to be. And we are seeing that across our lives as we become all remote. I mean, look at this conference. We are not in person. We are doing it remote, and we know who's on right now, and we can look at some of the data. We'll obviously do it in a very privacy compliant way, but any conference today online has much more data about what all the people who are attending the conference are doing and not doing than one used to have in in traditional on-prem conferences. On-prem, you know what I mean. So what's the challenge? Well, the challenge is that this is complex. Data is complex. Data is not that straightforward. And I'll come to my analysis of kind of tongue-in-cheek analysis of why I think data is different. But on a serious note, data is complex. As an industry, the IT industry is great at adopting new technologies, but we suck at getting rid of old technologies. So they're still all sitting there, right? I mean, all of you saw recently, various state governors come and say, oh, we need COBOL programmers because we cannot process all these, unemployment checks and other checks which are needed because we have old legacy systems and we have not maintained them. And that's a reflection of old systems not being retired, and data lives in those systems. At the same time, we keep adopting new SaaS technologies and new other, cloud native technologies, all of which are creating all these islands of data which are making the complexity even worse. Of course, the cost of compliance and regulatory requirements is getting higher and higher as we see more and more compliance requirements come up. Now CCPA is live, GDPR obviously has been around for a while now. Every country seems to be coming up with their own variants of it, right? And the cost of storing data is also very high. Recently there's been a lot of talk about what does it cost on the cloud to store data, and more importantly, what does it cost to get data out, right? The ingress and egress costs of data. And overall, moving data around just from one island to the other one is expensive because data takes time, takes network capacity and a lot of storage, and it makes it very, very expensive. And all of this needs, and the multiple demands we are seeing, right, from data monetization, which the business wants, to test data, to training data, all of them are creating more and more demands, which is making data probably the most complex layer in your infrastructure, in your stack to handle. And which is why I believe focusing on a data strategy is probably the most important thing you can do. Now, here's where I mentioned, let's have some fun with data, right? So in the DevOps world, in the cloud world, there's always this talk about, you need to have cattle, not pets, right? You don't want a cute puppy dog you need to have to take care of and it has a name. What you want is cattle, which has a number, has a tag on the ear, and you kill it when it is not performing the way you want it to. So I got wondering, I was wondering, what is data? Is data a pet? Or is data cattle, or is it something else? My conclusion is that data is pet-ish, right? It needs to be protected and governed like a pet. But really, it needs to be protected and governed en masse, right? You're not protecting a table, you're protecting all the data you have, so is it cattle? Data sharing and distribution needs to be done, and it's challenging and expensive. Well, I don't do sharing and distribution of my puppy dog, right? I don't want to share my puppy dog with anybody. I do have to share and distribute my cattle. So more like cattle. You cannot be too far away from your data. You've got these data gravity issues, right? The further away you are, the more latency you have. So, okay, it's a pet. I don't care where my cattle is. It's on a ranch somewhere, but I want my pup right here, right? Close to me. Data loss is not acceptable. Well, pet loss is totally not acceptable, but cattle loss, a little bit is acceptable. So it's more like cattle. Data has noise, and that is acceptable, right? I mean, the natural data has errors in it, right? It has signal and noise. That is acceptable. You might cleanse it a little bit. That's more like cattle, right? Where, cattle which are diseased, you get rid of them. Auditors come and check on the health of your data. That's more like cattle. There's nobody knocking at the door saying, are you taking good care of your pup, of your dog or your cat? But people do show up on farms and say the health workers show up and say, are you taking good care of your cattle? I can clone my data multiple times. I've heard of people cloning and replicating their pets, but not a good practice. You cannot start afresh with data. I mean, I can start afresh with cattle, right? Get rid of all of them and get a new batch because they were not good. Probably happens every few years, right? On a large cattle farm, but I don't want that to my pet. Right? Data cannot be discarded or changed in an ad hoc manner, right? I mean, I own the data. I mean, I was working recently with a client, which is an 80-year-old company. Well, they've got 80 years worth of data, which they cannot get rid of. They shouldn't get rid of, they don't want to get rid of. So what is data? Petish. It's like a pet, like a python is a pet, right? It's not really, shouldn't be a pet, but, and people are upset when you have a python, but there are a lot of people who think python are pets. They have to take care of it. They have to feed it. There's frozen rats in the freezer if you have a python. So it's not like a normal pet, but it's like, and also you can't get rid of it. I mean, if you want to get rid of a python, what do? Drive to the Florida Everglades and leave it there? That's also illegal. So here's my conclusion. Data is pettish, like a python is pettish. Not a pet, not cattle, somewhere in between. And it has to be treated like that, which is what makes data so difficult to work with. Now, before I move on, if there's any people who've taken psychology in school and are wondering whether I have some kind of a deep ingrained phobias of snakes, which is why I have a dog photo and a cow photo, but a cartoon of a python, you're absolutely right. I could not even get myself to copy and paste a picture of a python or any kind of snake on this chart, but we'll keep it between us. So what does a modern enterprise data strategy look like? Harvard Business Review published something a year and a half ago, which I've been using with every data-related conversation I have, because I think it really, really captures it well, right? And what essentially they are saying is there are three aspects to a modern data strategy that need to exist, and all five need to exist in order for your data strategy to work. If any one of them is missing, you're going to run into trouble. First of all, you need to have the organizational capability to handle data like a product across the enterprise. It's like Devops. It's like anything. It's like cloud native development. It's like mobile apps. Everything works great when you're in a co-located two-pizza size team. But as soon as you start growing and try to scale that to the enterprise, those things don't work because the cultural inertia of your organization gets in the way. Same is true for data. You will have little growth beyond silos if you don't have the organizational capability outside of your data science teams or your chief data officer's team to handle data like a product. Secondly, you've got to find a way to monetize the data. If you can't get business value out of it, either by monetizing it directly, that means you're selling the data on the market via marketplace, or you're selling the insights or including the insights from the data somehow in your product so that you can get value out of it, right? So there is a way you can get business benefit. Third is you have to have a way to have complete defense and compliance, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is going to cost you money, it's going to get you into trouble with your auditors, it's going to get you a lot of bad publicity, if you get hacked, and that has all got to do with defense and compliance, right? Same way, quality and accessibility. Is your data high quality, right? Is it high quality? Because if it isn't, you're going to get bad results from the insights you're getting if your data is not high quality. As I mentioned earlier on, data has noise. Noise is okay as long as you know what noise is there, and your models and your ability to analyze that data includes the ability to consume that noise and work with that noise, right? What is an outlier versus what is acceptable noise in the texture of the data is something you need to understand, but you need to have metrics, you have to have measures to maintain that quality so that it's usable. And last but not the least, you need to have the right technology in place. And we'll talk a little bit about all of these, but obviously about technology, as this is TechStrong Con, we have to talk about technology, because without technology, you cannot scale, right? I mean, you cannot be doing manual tickets to deal with data. You cannot be manually copying data around and cloning copies, because that's not scalable. So let's talk about what does adopting a modern data strategy look like? Well, first of all, like any strategy, adopting a modern data strategy takes both top-down and bottom-up engagement, right? It has to be sponsored by the C-suite, but if all the employees are not on board, it's not going to work, right? So here's a couple of quotes to go with it. right? Anjul Bhamri from Adobe had this quote talking, this is something, the CIO needs to lead, setting up a data strategy. In fact, whenever I'm having conversations around an enterprise data strategy with a client, if I'm not speaking to the CIO or if there is a CDO in that organization who works for the CIO or is a peer of the CIO, it's not going to go very far because you'll be stuck in a conversation will be stuck in that business unit or that silo to which it is where we are having that conversation, and that's not useful enough. To make it enterprise level, the sponsorship has to come from the C-suite, and that culture of data will only come if it is sponsored from the top. But as the CTO of Capital One says, unless there is buy-in from the employees and they're on board with whatever your broad vision of what to do with the data as you become a more digital company is, and there isn't a better example of that than Capital One when it comes to the banking sector, it's not going to work. The transformation will not take place because the biggest thing you have to overcome in any transformation is cultural inertia. And who is the culture? It's the employees. The CEO, the CIO, the CTO, the CDO, CISO, they can all talk a great picture and paint a great vision, but unless the employees buy into it and are on board and change how they operate and are willing to change how they operate, it's not going to be a transformation which succeeds, which works. Establishing the right data culture to kind of continue on that thread requires all the players to be on board. Now, who are the players, right? For those of you who come from the DevOps world, right, we know who all the players are in an application delivery pipeline, who the stakeholders are. Who are the players in a data pipeline? Well, there are 4 players in my example, other than the customer, the end user. First one is the data supplier. Where is the data coming from? These can be internal suppliers of the data. So if I'm business unit A and I'm using some data from business unit B, right, it's a data supplier to me. If I'm an IT person and I'm using customer behavior data, well, from an application, whoever owns that application owns the data. So they are the data supplier to me. So I can now analyze that data and draw inferences about how my customers are behaving. More and more, we are now seeing these data suppliers can be third-party sources, right? Outsiders we are buying data from, right? Companies are buying data from. So this can be a social media company. This can be a data broker. All of that data now needs to be cleansed, made compliant if it isn't, and it needs to be intermingled with other data sources in order to be able to draw the right inferences. Whenever there is data in the company, there has to be a data owner. It's usually people in the business who own the data, who own the customers, and they are responsible for the data. They own it, and eventually they are the ones who have to be brought on board for us to treat that data like a product. If on the IT side, the data owners are the IT people, right? So logs being generated, customer behavior metrics which are coming out of an app, performance metrics, all that stuff. Well, the logging and monitoring observability data is owned by IT. And so they are also data owners. Then there are the data managers. Well, these are the traditional DBAs, right? These are the people who own the data. They own the infrastructure. They own the data stores. They manage it. They secure it. They distribute it. They encrypt it. They obfuscate it. They will do all the things to make that data flow through the organization. And finally, there's the data consumer. The data consumer is the person who built the app, which is going to use the data. It's the data scientist who's going to train her models on using data and then run the model on new production data to gain those insights. And the data consumer is also the customer, right? I mean, if I look at my, United app and cry about all the miles which are sitting there, which I cannot use today, and I'm a data consumer of, an application which has a data owner. There's a executive at United Airlines which owns the mileage program. So he or she is the data owner. The data supplier is the mileage program, right? And all the flights I've taken, and third-party airlines through which every flight I flew on Lufthansa is also added to my United balance. The data managers, all the DBAs who manage the databases which have all the mileage information and the flight information. I'm a consumer. The mileage app is a consumer. The reward system is a consumer. If I use the miles to buy some magazines, which they keep telling me to do for some unknown reason, that magazine, company selling the magazines is now also a data consumer. So you get the idea. All of these people need to work together. Just like we talk about in DevOps, all people need to work together to make that flow and use of data lean and efficient. An enterprise data strategy, when I'm going in and helping a client understand and adopt an enterprise data strategy or refine their enterprise data strategy to make it more modern, these are the 6 things one needs to focus on. And these 6 things can be mapped back to the 5 areas I talked about from the Harvard study. And I have a chart on that later on. The first thing one needs to do is define business goals and objectives. Let me just jump into, in interest of time, these areas. Number 1, you need to define the goals and objectives. What do you want to do with the data, right? What are the business drivers that you want to access data for? Are you trying to mine it for some information? Are you trying to sell it to somebody else? Are you trying to draw some inferences? Are you able to do some predictive analytics? Are you trying to figure out when you'll have a next outage, or how much you can sell, how many people you should hire? What do you want to do with the data? And then once you have that data productized, how are you going to measure success? How are you going to measure progress on the adoption of your data strategy? And is it tied back to your digital transformation? So all this information, all these drivers and challenges need to come from whatever your goals for your business transformation are. So the top layer in my 3x3 matrix, which I had for digital transformation earlier on. So, second, understand your data landscape. You'll be surprised how many organizations I walk into and I say, do you have a good inventory of all your data? And you get a lot of head scratches saying, what do you mean inventory? Yeah, I know what all these databases are. I can tell you where my databases are. I'm like, or where my archives are, whether they're on tape or storage, or, I'm like, no, I'm asking you for an inventory of the data, not the data stores. What is in the data? What kind of information do you have? Is that information useful? Have you classified that information? Once you have an inventory, then you got to classify all the data, right? Or what kind of data do you have? What is the classification level? What is useful? What's not? What needs to be protected? What doesn't? And then you need to come to segmenting that data to figure out, okay, how can I segment that data into data sets which are useful to me? I need this for training. I need this for running my models. I need this for testing. This is all the data I can run historical analytics on. Who owns it is next. Once you've got the inventory, who owns it? And I was talking to this large multi-billion-dollar company CIO, and we were having this conversation, and he said, we have data sets from 30, 40 years ago. Nobody owns them because that business unit which created the data doesn't exist anymore. The applications which that data came out of has been retired. Nobody owns that data. We don't know what to do with it. So, but somebody needs to own it. Those 4 stakeholders from my previous chart, they need to be there. And then you have to identify who are the data managers, the data. So, you probably know the source from where the data came from, but who are the data owners of that, who are going to manage it, and who needs to consume it. Of course, you need a GRC model around it to be able to manage the risk and have a governance model, which is enterprise scale, right? A lot of times you find governance models around data which are for an application, or maybe for a business unit or for a program. But what about one which is modern and at the enterprise, right? And it has to be modern. That's very important. I remember I was sitting with a senior executive of a bank, and we were going. At my previous job, and we were going over how their data is distributed, and he's explaining to me on a whiteboard their encryption key management processes, right? And usually I'm very good at keeping a poker face no matter how stupid somebody's sounding, right? Especially if it's a senior executive of my client. I'm pretty good at it, right? But I just couldn't, I must have let some expression through, because he looked at me, smiled, and went, yes, I know the 90s called. They want our encryption key management, their encryption key management back. And it was seriously archaic. It was horrible. But it needs to be modern. It needs to be for the kind of speed one needs today. I'll give you another example. Another bank. Spend a lot of time at banks. They're building a machine learning model. And the person I'm sitting having lunch with, and he's pulling his hair and he's telling me that he can only get data for 3 years. I'm like, why? He's like, well, we have decades of data, but under the current policy we have of how we protect and archive data, anything older than 3 years is considered archive. I have no access to it. He's like, all my cycles are annual. There's only one tax day a year. Okay, 4 if you're a company. There's only one, there's a lot of annual events, right? There's only one Black Friday in a year. No matter how many times, these online companies say, oh, this is also Black Friday. The real one is only once. A lot of things are cyclical. If he has only 3 years worth of data, what's the problem there? He has 3 data points. That's not a trend. Especially with a company which is decades old, and they have decades of data because some governance policy, he cannot get access to it. Well, that's just wrong. Metadata management, right? How are you going to manage the metadata of the data, right? Data provenance, where did the data come from? Data lineage, how did the data change over time? If you removed an outlier, you have to track it. If you transform the data in some way, right? Maybe it's internationalized data and you have to change the dates. That needs to be tracked, right? That lineage is very important, right? I mean, I was recently reading an article from Netflix Engineering, my favorite blog, engineering blog, and they're talking about how their data, lineage data, is actually more in size than the actual data whose lineage they're tracking. Now, that's crazy, man. Having proper data dictionaries, right? Having metadata discovery and management. These are things which should be considered basic, but you'll be surprised how many organizations don't do it in an integrated enterprise scale manner. And adopting data ops, right? What are your data consumption use cases? And how are you going to provision and distribute that data in a lean and agile manner and have monitoring and alerting around that data, right? Having policies to say who can have access to data and where can it be provisioned? How can you ensure your storage costs don't balloon because now everybody has the ability to provision data and suddenly you've gone from a few terabytes to a few 100 terabytes because suddenly everybody wants their own copy of data. And is there a way to virtualize it? How do you control access? How do you control governance and compliance? All those are critical. And I've already talked about data quality a lot, right? Do you have a way to manage? Do you have metrics to determine what level of quality that data is? How do you maintain data integrity? How do you have data remediation, quality remediation, which is automated? All of these are six things one needs to do in order to put together a comprehensive enterprise data strategy for your digital transformation. And as you can see from this chart, if I go back to those 5 metrics, the 5 areas as defined from the HBR article, these map perfectly, right? All of these are needed in 1 or more area, 2 or more areas actually, in order for you to have a comprehensive digital transformation which is successful. This is critical, folks. Now, this is also difficult. This is not easy, right? This is just an anonymized sprint plan I put together for a client I was working on how to go and create, implement those 6 steps of the data strategy for each and every one of their business units, because you can't just do it for one and assume it'll work for all of them. Every business unit in that organization, in most large enterprises, is different. I always joke that in most of my clients I go to, if I get off by mistake at the wrong floor in the building, once we start traveling again, it feels like I'm in a different company, right? One floor, it's all like modern and they've got whiteboards and cool MacBooks and they're doing agile stuff, and I got off on another floor and it's, not so agile, and not really old school systems, and they're just, I wouldn't be surprised if there's back there somewhere backups on tape, right? But that exists today, right? And I know that's an extreme case, but in most organizations, they're there's a lot of variance. You have to do it over and over again for every business unit, every, technology stack which is there, to come up with a comprehensive strategy for each and every one of those 6 areas. So in conclusion, data is at the center of all the challenges you're facing with your digital transformation. Most organizations are facing with their digital transformation. Data needs to be addressed head on. And the way to do that is by stepping back and saying, do I have an enterprise data strategy? And is that the right enterprise data strategy for the kind of digital transformation I'm trying to do, which is on the left side of the screen? Excuse me. And do I have the right stakeholders working together in a collaborative manner, and my data distribution and data access is lean and efficient and secure and compliant at the same time to make my data strategy successful? With that, thank you for your time. Here is my contact information. If anybody would like to, have a conversation with me. Something I do actually when I go to a real physical, this is also a real conference, but a physical conference, you know what I mean. I hand off, these bookmarks to people who attend, and on it there's a QR code which gives all the attendees an access to a 30-minute one-on-one with me free of charge to discuss this or any other topic you'd like to talk about. So you can scan this QR code right here with this virtual bookmark, or if you can go to my blog, sdarchitect.blog, there's a link there which says request a meeting, and please do put in what you'd like to talk about so I come prepared, and we're not just having a conversation to have a conversation, but I would love to hear back, from you. One of the downsides of virtual is I'm not getting any feedback other than, Q&A, which we'll answer right after. But I would love to have an interaction with you. So if you found this useful or if you found this useless, but would like to have a conversation with me about what we discussed today, do reach out and feel free to DM me on Twitter. I'm very active on it, or send me an email. With that, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Many thanks to Sanjeev for that great presentation from TechStrong Con. All right, up next, it's time for the news. Couple articles as usual, some real headlines to tell you about around our sites, but again, always go check the sites. There's a lot there. But over on Devops.com today, we have measuring DevOps performance. Measuring the performance of a software delivery team is the basic foundation on which you can assess the impact of changes. Metrics provide a reliable long-term indicator of how your software delivery team is performing. But I'm going to add my own caution here. For too long in DevOps, it was speed. How many deliveries are you doing a day, a month, a week? And I don't know if that's the only metric that matters. And read the article, you'll get more on that. Also on Devops.com, we have why the success of edge computing relies on a Linux legacy. I don't know. I happen to agree with that statement, but you should read the article, and I'm sure you'll have your own views. Also, we have Infosys launches Cloud Orchestrator, SolarWinds updates its APM portfolio, and Cisco gives healthcare access free gear, like many companies are doing to help fight COVID. Over on Security Boulevard today, we have data's double-edged sword. And yes, it's true, sometimes there is a double-edged sword there. Read the article if it's not obvious to you. And then also on the Boulevard, 6 steps to securing production file data in the cloud. People like those kind of step-by-step, 6 steps, 4 steps, what have you. And then we have, over on Container Journal, Buoyant extends service mesh across multiple Kubernetes clusters. And, I think service mesh is probably one of the key areas that we're seeing go up on in the cloud native world and the whole Kubernetes thing. So that's our news for today. And as usual, just 6 of them. There's so much more on our sites. Go check out our sites. All right. Next, we're going to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has 2 guests today. One is Josh Otwell from Splunk, and always good to hear what our friends at Splunk is doing. And the other is, I don't want to mispronounce his name, Mike Wood from Versa Networks, and that's on SD-WAN. So check that out, and let's turn things over to Charlene.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with Josh Otwell, who is the Senior Technology Advocate at Splunk. Hey Josh, good to see you again. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Charlene. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. So AI ops, I know that's something that Splunk has been very, very involved in. And I'd like to kind of get your thoughts around AI ops as it pertains to kind of these modern IT environments. We'd like to talk specifically about, what's the significance of AI ops as organizations move toward kind of a much more modern architecture. So I'd like to kind of start by just mentioning one thing that I know you've said, which is basically that legacy IT management tools are holding organizations back. And so I wonder if you can kind of walk us through your reasons why you think that is.
Yeah, and it's been very interesting in IT, particularly in the last decade, as we went into needing to have a website and then a mobile presence, then the mobile applications, and then people wanted those things connected. They wanted a connected experience. They wanted to know that from the mobile app to the website, everything was consistent, the communication was consistent. And when you look at the methods at which an organization works to create that connected experience, it's utilizing new architectures, new technologies that didn't exist a decade ago. or were very, very new and weren't applied in those ways. And the cloud in particular, obviously, has been a big facilitator of that. Those tools weren't built for the cloud and with the cloud in mind. I'm legacy virtualization administrator and architect, very accustomed to working with domain-centric tools, those that understood the context of where the applications resided. When you move the applications to the cloud, well, your context shifts. And most of those tools don't handle that shift as well. You move from very static registries of information to publicly accessible APIs that you now have to connect to. So that's been the primary transition. Also, a lot of the organizations, the tooling that they've applied, the vendors have done what they can. Like they're working hard. They're trying to maintain their relevance and their value outside of the data center. But most of them have stretched about as far as they can. And you're starting to see more and more look to re-platform or retool, which, as we know, is a slow and arduous and painful process. And so that the combination of those things have really led for a need for your tools to have a great deal more flexibility than they were originally designed and built for.
So, when we're talking about a lot of these legacy applications, obviously these are on-premises applications that, to your point, don't really move to the cloud very well or don't actually work with the cloud very well. I imagine, especially when we're talking about today's environment where everybody's working from home and you can't really afford to have the information that your employees need to be able to do their jobs sitting in an on-premises data center and not accessible. So, what other considerations do organizations really need to consider when we're talking about, their legacy IT operations or legacy IT applications? I mean, are we talking about maybe considering an entire overhaul of their IT infrastructures, or is it more of a kind of an overlay or kind of a gradual transition? Or it just seems like there's a lot to consider when we're talking about shifting from a legacy IT environment.
You're absolutely correct. I think the easiest way to answer that question for an organization is to recognize that it's not black and white. Mm-hmm. Right? There's no switch to be flipped to get from one to the other. It's very much a spectrum. And a lot of that is directly associated to the application portfolio that the organization has managed. Adrian Cockcroft made a statement that I thought was really powerful. He's an exec at AWS, mm-hmm. and he made the statement that 20 years ago, the systems that IT supported were only touched by people that worked at the company. And today, the most critical technology that IT and the technology organization supports is directly touched by customers. And so that, on top of the shifting demands from customers and the shifting needs of employees in the scenario that we're dealing with today, that recognition, honestly, is that the agility is the key component. And so a lot of our customers we see who had long-term digital transformation plans, they've accelerated a lot of those plans. Some of them were able to do it because they were able to address a backlog. Organizations who had stores where the stores were closed, mm-hmm. different maintenance and different requirements during that time. So they were actually able to take advantage of the new demand, utilize different availability that people had so that they could attack those backlogs and address those needs. And tooling and platforms was a big part of that.
Okay. All right. And I imagine also that there is, especially as organizations move even more into this digital transformation and digital ways of working, that intelligence has to play a very large part in not only recognizing the areas of opportunity for organizations, but also kind of see the areas where maybe they're falling down a little bit and, helping uncover customer insights and just basically enabling them to do their business more effectively. So, I imagine this is, kind of another argument for moving off the legacy IT environments, because a lot of them currently don't have that level of intelligence that's necessary.
You're absolutely right. And when you think about what tooling was required to manage and the scope and complexity that we dealt with when most of those tools were first created and utilized. There wasn't this level of complexity for most organizations, but as more and more enterprises have had to adopt and look to adopt a wider range of platforms to support their needs, that complexity developed in and of itself. And then, as I highlighted earlier, that interconnected experience that customers now look for means that they've had to rethink even the applications that they just deployed, in the last 5 years. They're already having to reconsider how those are being applied. So it is an ever shifting platform underneath the technology organization. But at the same time, we're also seeing these organizations be real drivers for success for the business, allowing them to adjust as conditions change, whether they're market conditions or whether their business target objectives change. And this improved framework for how you analyze and review the tools that you use and apply them is helping facilitate that.
Okay. All right, great. So where does AI ops fit into this paradigm then that a lot of organizations are experiencing?
You stated it before, intelligence. One of the key components or key challenges, I should say, that really are negatively impacting IT professionals is in that complexity, in the distributed models of applications today, and that rapid shift that happens. Humans are really good at solving problems, but with that amount of digital exhaust and data that are coming off those systems and that complexity, it's very difficult for us to identify those patterns and to identify them quickly. And now we have platforms that have intelligence embedded into them that help identify patterns, help to normalize information, consolidate it so that it's more consumable, to augment the capacity of the human operators, the ones who need to address, and then tie that in with the growth and the increased capabilities of automation platforms to be able to automate responses and to integrate with other tools that IT professionals are using. And this is where you get that end-to-end intelligence, where not only are you able to identify a potential issue, but now you can start moving into proactively predicting when an issue may occur, notify the correct responders in order to prevent that incident. Because frankly, today, a degraded state is the new down state, right? Customers feel whenever things aren't responding in a manner that they're accustomed to.
Right. And they're more apt to leave, if it's an app and never come back. So
or to communicate their frustration, which is double-sided. So the tooling has to have the intelligence built in to help identify these potential issues, to be able to say, I've seen this pattern and scenario before, maybe for this application or for a similar application. I'm going to send a notification out. Here's some contextual information on how to respond to it and what's going on. Here's a dashboard to dive into where the problem is, or here's a log stack that gives information. Or from an observability standpoint, being able to look at just the general health of that ecosystem or that system.
So, in light of the current situation that we're facing, the COVID-19 pandemic and the work from home mandates, I imagine that there are a lot more organizations that are looking at technology such as AI ops just to kind of help accelerate their digital transformation efforts. And so do you think that this is for these companies, it's become kind of a less of a kind of a nice to have thing in their pocket, if you will, and more of a necessary kind of keep the lights on technology to just kind of get them through this and then be able to really be successful following the pandemic? I mean, is it more of a mandate now than it was?
I think it is. And the primary reason is if we're being really fair and honest, a lot of people's digital transformations were aspirational. And I don't mean that negatively. This is where we want to go to prevent us from being disrupted, to improve the customer experience, like just the right motivations.
Right.
But frankly, they haven't really been tested that surely, right? The current situation, we've been dealing with the pandemic, the transition from people being shelter in place and being at home more, the way that consumers now interact with companies. They interacted in those manners before, but now they're dependent on those interactions. Rather it being an option, now it's the only option for a lot of companies.
Sure.
And that transition has really put stress on a lot of those transformational efforts. You can very quickly, as a consumer, I'm sure you've seen it, I've seen it, some of the companies, particularly restaurants and retail, they've responded more quickly than others. Mm-hmm. And even the ones that lagged a little bit behind, you see them catching up and doing varying degrees of success on how they're responding. So I think this current scenario has emphasized some gaps that they had in their plan. And I anticipate a lot of those gaps were really data and knowledge gaps, just unaware of how the system was going to respond, and now seeing new condition states that they have to respond to.
I think a lot of companies also, to your point about them, their digital transformation efforts being aspirational, I think a lot of them just didn't really see the necessity, the importance of doing a digital transformation effort until, there was always something that was more important that had to get done. And now that, when this hit, all of a sudden everybody collectively realized, wow, this is what we need to do. And we need to do it fast in order to survive. So very interesting stuff. Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to find out, I think, maybe, having a conversation 6 months from now about how many organizations actually did undergo major digital transformation efforts during this pandemic and actually kind of, quote unquote, live to tell the tale. And, and without having done those digital transformations, they might not actually be around these days. So we'll have to keep our finger on the pulse of that and check back on that later. But Josh, thanks so much for the information. Love to have a conversation with you, and I'm sure we'll be having more conversations about digital transformation and AI ops in the future. So thanks again. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, great. All right, people, please stick around. We've got lots more technology and with TechStrong TV coming up, lots more great interviews. So please stay tuned.
Devops.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. Devops.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. Devops.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. Devops.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. I'm here now with Mike Wood, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Versa Networks. Hey, Mike, how are you? Great to see you.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Charlene.
Great. Well, I wanted to talk to you today about a new secure SD-WAN offering that you guys have coming out, if it's not out already. So you guys have really kind of geared this to the work from home, or the stay at home, don't ever leave your house again crowd, it seems like these days. But tell me a little bit about the offering, first of all, and what makes it really, really applicable to the work from home employee base.
Well, you're right, Charlene. It does seem like the new norm is working from home, or even working from anywhere, and fewer people are in the office today. What we've introduced is called Versa Secure Access, It's a completely cloud managed, cloud delivered software as a service model that requires no hardware. It's all software based. And the idea is that as an employee of a company, through my IT team, I can now get access, secure, reliable, high performance, including secure SD-WAN capabilities, all the way down to my client. And that means a Windows device, a Mac device, even iOS devices, and eventually we'll introduce Android. So you're simply running the Versa Secure Access client on those end devices. You're taking advantage of Versa's system of globally distributed Versa cloud gateways, and those are connecting into the cloud, into cloud services and SaaS, but they're also connecting directly through VPN into your corporate private data center and all the applications that are available there. So we're very excited about this. We think it's very innovative and incredibly unique and certainly relevant right now.
Right. So let's talk about it. I mean, what makes this technology, first of all, necessary in these times, and what areas or what issues are you addressing with this SD-WAN offering?
Well, there's no surprise that COVID-19 crisis has created a dramatic increase in the number of work from home employees and staff, and many enterprises have been affected and have been redirecting money and resources and effort to address this new norm. Typically, Charlene, a work from home solution is oftentimes a more traditional VPN model where I have hardware in a private data center and all of my employees who are working remotely or working from home are accessing and creating sessions into those VPN concentrators. IT has typically designed these systems to handle a fraction of the employees remotely for a fraction of the time. And so we've never seen a situation like this. Expanding the current model, many IT teams have really moved quickly to provide that relief, but in the process have uncovered a lot of challenges. And we're hearing now CIOs beginning to focus more on rebuilding and re-architecting their infrastructure so that they're prepared for this new normal. And that new normal is hybrid and multi-cloud. It's increased SaaS applications. It's a workforce dynamic that can enable a work from anywhere model. And it's being able to do that in a very secure, reliable, quality of experience manner for not just those on-premises applications, but also the cloud and SaaS applications. And we have discovered that in the process of enterprises expanding their current offering, many of them have actually bypassed maybe the regular processes that they normally go through and the measures that they go through to kind of make sure that things are rolled out in a systematic and high security mechanisms. Mm-hmm. With this current model that where people have rolled out traditional VPN, there's been a bit of more exposure, I would say, to attacks in the home network, which is really ends up being the weakest link in all of this. And so this is something that we've been developing for some time. Quite frankly, Charlene, because of the COVID-19 situation, we accelerated that development and brought this in by 3 to 4 months to be able to make it available immediately to these enterprises.
That makes total sense. All right, great. So how does this work exactly? I mean, is it a service that the employee just kind of logs on to, or is it something that the IT administrator kind of goes in and maybe downloads a client on their device? Or can you kind of walk me through how that process works?
Absolutely. So an IT team at a business or an enterprise, they don't need to be a Versa customer today. They don't have to be running Versa Secure SD-WAN today. In fact, they could be running another SD-WAN service. They go to our portal and they place an order for the service, much like you would for any SaaS service that you would acquire or provision. Mm-hmm. A Versa in the back end then provisions our Versa Cloud gateways to be able to support used enterprise and the whatever number of users that you decide that you want to have on that system. And that could be tens of thousands of users, even hundreds of thousands. And then what happens is your employee base, the ones that you've selected or all of them, if you choose to have all of them be able to access the service, they install and very simply and easily configure the client, and they begin using the service. So it's a great model, an elastic model that allows a business to provide that connectivity, that security, but also that quality of experience, and ultimately also unique visibility into the entire system on an elastic basis and on a monthly basis. What that means is that I could have maybe 50, 100,000 employees on the system today, and next month, maybe half of them come back into the office. So I decide to shrink that back down to 50,000 employees. Maybe I acquire a company, Charlene, and that company I want to have onto my network and onto my system immediately. Suddenly, those 25,000 employees that are part of that new company that we've acquired, they come in and they're on the system. And it's dependent only on the user. So a user, I don't know about you, Charlene, but I've got about 5 to 7 different devices that I use. Yeah. This service will work across all those devices, and the licensing is only as one individual. So I might have a call that's going on, maybe a video collaboration, maybe I have email on another device, and maybe I'm accessing an on-premise application on a third device. All those look like one single license instance. So it's very scalable and very powerful for these enterprises.
That's great. That's really great. So yeah, we've been hearing a lot about SD-WAN technology, just in general, but ever since the pandemic hit and folks have been working from home, we've been hearing about it a lot more. So do you think that this type of technology is going to become more prevalent and almost ubiquitous as, we work through this pandemic and then, possibly future pandemics that will force us to work from home? I mean, do you think that this type of technology is really going to be the way forward?
I really do. I think it is. It's what I've been hearing, Charlene, is that in many companies, these companies where IT has gone out and implemented, for example, secure SD-WAN, they've implemented more cloud services and more SaaS services. Those businesses and those companies were in the best position to maintain business continuity during this unique event that's occurred. Mm-hmm. And I think other enterprise IT teams are looking at companies who went out and made these investments and deployed these architectures as a model for how they should be implementing their infrastructure and IT systems going forward. And I've heard some say never again. We will not be caught flat-footed in this type of situation or another type of situation where we're not able to go back up to our leadership and be able to say, yes, the business will continue without a hiccup at all. And so I think it really has, it's been a bit of a wake-up call. Fortunately, there's a number of IT teams who made these investments early on, and they've been able to respond. They're the heroes, during this time, I believe.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, if this pandemic wasn't a kick in the pants for digital transformation efforts, I don't know what will be. So I expect that we're going to hear a lot more about software-defined networks in general, but certainly SD-WAN in the months ahead as organizations move forward with their plans. And, I guess one of the things that I really like about SD-WAN is the fact that, it's not a rip and replace technology. It's something that organizations can kind of migrate into. It can be an overlay on an existing network, and then as organizations evolve their architectures, then they can go more software defined. So I think it's a great technology, and I think it's finally getting its due.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It is the ability to run as an overlay, but also even integrate with existing infrastructure, as you're saying, is a key component to this. The ability to work with what's there today, especially larger enterprises. They're not going to be decommissioning their entire network, their entire infrastructure. There's got to be a migration model, and that's really, I think, the power of a secure SD-WAN architecture.
That's great. And not to mention the security benefits that SD-WAN offers over traditional architectures. So good stuff. Well, Mike, I wish you guys the best of luck with this new technology, and maybe let's circle back in a couple months and see how you guys are doing again.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time.
All right, great. Well, thanks very much for coming on to TechStrong TV. Okay, everybody, we've got lots more coming up on TechStrong TV, so please stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. Two great interviews today. Now, let's go on over to our Analyst Corner with Mitch, where Mitchell Ashley is standing by. Hey, Mitch, take it away.
Hi, and welcome to Analyst Corner. We continue to examine, monitor, reassess our own businesses as COVID-19 has its impact on us, both from a health and economic and business operations standpoint, but also what the customer behaviors and expectations are around how we deliver goods and services. Starbucks recently announced that they're going to be closing 400 stores, retail cafe experience stores. That's usually how I consume that type of service, once in a while through the drive-through, sometimes through pickup, through ordering through a mobile app. So they're closing 400 stores across the US and Canada over the next 18 months and really redesigning their business to be a blend, but much more around the delivery of pickup only and to-go business. That also means that at the same time, they're opening up 300 new locations across North America that are specializing in that carry-out and pickup type model. Now you can imagine, I mean, certainly the drive-through lines at Starbucks have been busy at the locations around the businesses and around where I live. I'm sure it's very similar to where you live as well. But imagine this shift. That's a significant business model shift for them. And while they may offer those capabilities today, imagine that a majority or a large majority of your business now shifting to that on the go or to-go market. Nearly 80% of the transactions across 15,000 stores are on the go right now. So they're operating in this mode today, sort of in a response to, immediately reaction to, but now think to COVID and the restrictions. Now think that is almost your primary business model and what some of the changes will be with the technologies that they're using. We talked about accelerating digital strategies, digital projects. I mean, we're effectively talking about a pretty big sea change for an organization to shift largely from a cafe experience to a walk-up experience. And is that like ordering ice cream, or is there a different experience for delivering coffee? And while we talk about this as a digital strategy, acceleration of digital transformation projects, that experience may be different with coffee. I'm interested to see with that kind of service. Maybe there's new kind of beverages or food or other services that might go along with that if you're on the go versus wanting to stay in a restaurant. Now, my point around this is we're seeing lots of changes. We're seeing JCPenney's and others going out of business or at least filing for bankruptcy. We're seeing airlines like Delta saying that they still promise to carry, or they're committed to carry 18 cities to city routes, so direct routes in their airline traffic. We see organizations in the education field about how they're delivering remote services to students through digital online experiences, and in some cases returning to campus. A lot of things are still in this kind of turmoil, this churn of what does the next thing look like? And I think a big factor of why it's not settling very quickly is that we still don't know if we're going to get a rebound or return of the COVID virus. I mean, we certainly are seeing a ramp up and spike in new areas across the US and Arizona and Utah and in the southeast, as opposed to New York and Washington, those kind of locations that we have in the past. So there's very much an anticipation of a resurgence, not only in the fall, but possibly this summer, because apparently COVID is not slowing down as much as they thought it would from the summer heat. So we'll see what that means. But in the meantime, businesses are making some very serious investments in transforming their interactions with customers. And one of the points that I'd like to make about this is that those aren't temporary. I think as we shift to digital experiences, as we shift to a carry-out, pick-up, on-the-go type experience for coffee with Starbucks, or we experience a curbside pickup for restaurants and electronics goods and retail goods from stores like Target and others, that's very much will be something that will be with us for a long time. Because I know a lot of discussions are happening in the circles that I live and work in about what does reentry look like, and are people willing to go into a restaurant? Are they willing to get together with 4 families for a get together to celebrate a birthday? Are they open to attending church or synagogue or mosque with many other people, or they want to stay with the digital experience that they may be having now with streaming services for something like that? Are they going to go to a rally, to a political event? Are they going to vote in person? How much risk are they willing to take? Depending on what's happening in our environment, that's going to dictate at least part of it, but of course their own personal health situation is going to drive that, as well as family members that they're around. So as we've transformed in adjusting to COVID-19 restrictions and the economic impact, that's setting the stage for the model we're building from. It's setting the stage for the next 10 years, not the next 10 months or 10 days. Because those interactions have changed. People will find benefit as businesses sort out how to best deliver goods and services to customers with these conditions that they're now operating under. And customers will build their behaviors and expect those kinds of services in the future. So keep that in mind as we're using technology to create this digital future. Yes, as an acceleration of maybe projects that we've had in the past as digital transformation projects. Maybe these interim steps may actually be fundamental steps to the next series of services, the next business platform, business offerings, services offerings that we're providing to our customers. So I think we're also in the middle of this kind of rethinking our digital transformation strategies, not necessarily throwing out what we had and going with something else, but shifting to a much more fluid, agile situation where we can respond quickly, as well as continuing and scale up what we're already doing to adjust to new customer expectations, behaviors. So again, I appreciate everyone that has reached out to me. We talk about what's happening in your world and how you're leveraging technology, digital strategies as part of your business. And I wish you all the best as we continue to move through this together. I look forward to our next time together. Thank you.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind Devops.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Thanks very much, Mitchell. Always great stuff. All right, up next, it's the channel roundup with Mike Fuzzer. Mike's guest today is Sanjay Berry of Netskope, and he'll be talking about Netskope's new partnership with VMware to secure remote workforces. It's good stuff there with Mike. Let's head on over to Mike Fuzzer on the channel roundup.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, thanks, guys. We're here with Sanjay Berry, who's the CEO of Netskope. Sanjay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Great to talk to you and see you.
Well, I don't think everybody knows precisely what it is that Netskope does. I mean, we know that you're in the realm of cybersecurity and surfacing up visibility and analytics a little bit. So explain to us what it is you guys do and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. So if you look at Netskope, the purpose of Netskope was that as companies transform digitally, what does that mean? Work from home, access cloud, let people bring in personal devices. They need to rethink security. How do they let people just do what I just said, yet secure a company's data, stop them against the people who are attacking them every day? And we view the situation that we're going through, frankly, for attackers as nirvana. And so protect data, protect threats, do it while enabling digital transformation, and do it in what we call a security cloud, which is what we do, build the security cloud.
So how do you get that data, or how do you collect it? I mean, I get that it's in the cloud, but the events themselves are all over the place. So how do you pull this all together?
Yeah. So what happens is that as users, so we're closing in on a third of the Fortune 100 as customers. And if you look at that, as users in these companies use software as a service applications, Office, Box, Slack, so on, as they go to the internet, the billions of websites, as they go to their own infrastructure, that traffic actually in many cases goes through Netscope. And Netscope then looks at that traffic and that transaction and finds credit card data, sensitive healthcare data, source code, other things, and make sure that that data is not going to the wrong place. It's not being exposed to the wrong people. And at the same time, as you and I, as team members of companies work, make sure when you access the web, make sure when you access these applications, there is not malware coming back down to you to cause you and your company problems. And so we have the world's largest cloud network in the world, 15 milliseconds away from anybody in the world. And we basically deliver this security, no matter where people are, in what I would call a cloud form.
And I'm assuming that architecture is what enables you to do that without adversely affecting application performance. Is that how that works?
It is. I mean, one of the things that we decided early on to do was, how do you deliver this next generation of security without a performance penalty? How do you make sure that when you walk into a healthcare organization, financial, retail, hospitality, high tech, that you say to them, look, we're here to help you digitally transform. You want to use SaaS? Great. You want to work from home? Great. BYOD? Great. What's the number one inhibitor to all those things? It's security. It's your auditors. It's the fact that you view you're taking on more risk. What does Netscope do? We come in and we flatten that risk and we say, look, protect your data, protect your threats, work from anywhere, don't sacrifice performance, bring you the cyber security you need. And the reality is most customers don't have that because they spent most of their money in the past decade and 2 decades buying appliances that don't understand cloud and cannot operate in the environment we operate now, where you have remote working and so on. So that's why I call it a transformation, and most organizations are going through it now.
So you guys just had an alliance with VMware, and I think that covers everything from Carbon Black all the way up through some of their desktop virtualization stuff. Walk us through what you guys are doing together.
Yeah, so, one, we're believers that in the security world, this is a massive industry. I mean, just the market we go after is over $20 billion going to 45. We're believers that you need to have an ecosystem and play well. Make sure that when a company invests in a specific platform, you make sure they work with your other platforms. And one of the predominant platforms out there is VMware, and it's stretches from the endpoint with Carbon Black, stretches all the way to the data center, stretches to their SD-WAN technology, right, with Bella Cloud and so on, and extends as well to their Workspace ONE, which is how you many people provision their endpoints with that technology. And so our alliance basically says, hey, the 2 leading platforms, so the leading secure cloud, which is now in Gartner's term SASE, right, Secure Access Services Edge, the leading platform there, Netscope, with the leading platform for whether it's endpoint, data center security, and SD-WAN combined, so that the 2 play well. So if you have both, they integrate seamlessly. And I think that's really what the alliance is about, is in this world, that's what people want. They want organizations, companies, platforms that play well, and next generation platforms. That's really what Netscope and VMware are.
How long do you think it will take us to get to that? I think a lot of people suddenly needed to work from home, and then everybody went home, and they may or may not have been given a laptop, and they were given a VPN client maybe, and they're not having the best experience in the world. And it feels like when we started this conversation, it was like, well, this is just going to be one large extended snow day. And now in reality, it looks like it might be the new normal. How do I get to this architecture that allows people to work from home more securely, put the desktop up in the cloud, and provide the SD-WAN connections? I mean, as I describe it, it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, here's a summary, like a stat for you. We process 50 billion transactions a day inline. And, most of the European, North American, APAC, healthcare, retail, financial goes through Netscope. And it used to be 27% of that was remote. Now it's close to 70%. Wow. And so that's real life data right there. And the reality is that what do you do? Like, you're working remote. What do you do when you're remote? Well, you access your corporate cloud applications, maybe Office, Box, Slack, you use Zoom like this. You go to maybe the public cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, and you go to the internet. And then the last thing you do is you probably go to your own data center if you're a company that has, applications in your own infrastructure. The reality is, if you look at Netscope, that's what we do. Like, you just deploy once and all of those access patterns are covered. And so one of the things we focus on is simplicity. So we've had a lot of customers come to us. They've been large healthcare financial saying, oh my God, Sanjay, we need to enable 50,000 users to get access to our on-premise infrastructure immediately. And we would say, well, you're already using us to cover SaaS. You don't have to do anything else. You're already deployed. Just activate the service. And so my point in saying that is, one of the benefits of delivering is that you don't have to truck roll net and appliances, worry about going on site and so on. And so it's a much easier activation. And that's also what's driven people to realize, wow, I can do this fairly quickly. I mean, I literally have enabled within 2 days enterprises to enable 50,000 users to work remote. And so, and so it is possible. The form factor delivered makes it possible. You look at the integration with VMware, similar. VMware with Workspace ONE can deliver endpoint technology to your endpoints in a systematic, very quick way, and in a similar fashion when you look across their other platforms. When you're looking at things like SD-WAN and so on, as people move to smaller remote offices, it's a great fit. And so I think combined, just a great, easy way to enable remote working. And it's not just an easy way. We're at Netscope, we're now 1,200 plus people, one of the fastest growing cyber companies. And one of the reasons I think is not just great data protection, threat protection, great team and culture, but also we're on the right side of history, meaning people want things that are easy, quick, fast to activate, don't require boxes stuck in a data center that take them forever to rack, and then really don't enable remote working. And so I think we're right in the bullseye of where the world's going.
What's your sense of what does it take for people to kind of realize this? And I'm going to ask this question because I'm sure I'm not the only one who kind of has this approach. But, people are using their VPNs. They access the corporate data center to do that. And then the minute that they got to access an internet service, they turn off the VPN because the latency is, a problem, and the video feed like Zoom doesn't work as well. So, at what point do organizations kind of wake up into that user behavior and go, this isn't going to work long term, and we're going to wind up with malware coming in from the cloud, dropped into the client, and then pushed back up through the VPN. So at what point do people realize that, this is a little insane?
Yeah. Here's the reality is that the VPN of old, where you sent all your traffic to your corporate network, and then it went out to the internet. You kind of wonder, like, okay, why am I sending back to my corporate network to then go back out to the internet and making it even worse performance? The reality is, why did people do that? Because they felt like, wait, but my security functionality, it's over there, right? It's on premise. The reality is that your security functionality, when you look at the world and you look at like say Netscope, it's in the cloud too. And we have invested in this worldwide network close to the end user so that you don't need to VPN back. In fact, no matter where you are and you roam across the world, you're going to be 15 milliseconds away from us, and you're going to get faster performance. And so I think people didn't have this before. Like if you asked someone 6 years ago or in 5, there wasn't something like that. And so their only alternative was to VPN back, right? And so there is no fault of anybody. It's just they didn't have the technology and the products and the capability. Now they do. And now that they do, we see more and more organizations, which used to be steadfast around VPN back, they're not anymore. And the reality is what's happened in the world has only accelerated that. It's tipped them over the edge, and they've said, oh my God, you know what? If we had any doubt before that we should be not hairpinning, that we should go direct through a security cloud, this has reinforced it for us. And so I think you're going to see an accelerated transformation to this new architecture, even for the many, folks who were sticking to the old VPN. It won't happen all at once because, enterprises don't move in one day, but they'll slowly start saying, oh, wait, for cloud traffic? Well, no VPN back. Direct to cloud through Netskope Secure Cloud. Oh, public cloud? No, don't do that. Direct to cloud, direct to their web traffic. Why am I saying web traffic back? And so I think you're seeing this migration happen.
Just say no to backhauling. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, look, I grew up in the enterprise, and so pragmatically, look, does everybody shift all their traffic to go direct immediately? No. But look, say no to backhauling for SaaS. SaaS is 50% of your web traffic, and you include public cloud in there. So say no to that. Go direct to internet through a security cloud for that. Then your next one is internet web traffic. Why are you sending all your 70% of users working remote to go to the internet back on premise? You're just buying more appliances, you're eating up bandwidth, you're costing yourself money. And those security equipment, they don't even understand the new language of internet, which is APIs, JSON, layering. And so it's kind of like, wait a minute, why am I hairpinning them back? I'm kind of hairpinning them back to nothing. So let me go direct. Let me go through a modern security stack. That's sort of what Netskope does. And better performance, better security. And then the last thing I think people are realizing is their own infrastructure. So my own data center. When people are remote, hey, I want that same capability. I want that same performance, especially as they move workloads to the public cloud. And it's not, quote, their own data center.
And if I did the math on that, I'd probably wind up still saving money because I'm not generating as much traffic going across a WAN run by a carrier somewhere who's, billing me for the pleasure, right?
Yeah, you're going to save in multiple ways. You save in bandwidth in and out of your network. You save in spending buying expensive equipment, VPNs, appliances from like web gateways that are on premise. All of these things, bandwidth, equipment savings, people to rack and, manage those hardware systems. And instead you say, you know what, I don't need any of that. And that's what a lot of our customers say is, wait a minute, Netskope, you have a network that is 147 terabits per second. That's half the internet. You deliver me better performance, and I get the security functionality where I don't have to worry about, me scaling it. It scales like a cloud horizontally, and it speaks the language that the internet speaks. And so there's a ton of cost savings. And in this, situation, frankly, people are looking for ways to converge, to optimize cost and enable remote work, and protect their data. And if you can do all of those together, which is kind of what we enable, I think that's why you see this acceleration.
All right. So short of coming and visiting your website, what's your best advice to customers right now?
Yeah, I think like the best advice I always have for customers is, first of all, during this time, everybody, including us, and want to take care of our customers, make sure they're healthy, make sure they're working, collaborating, their businesses are moving forward, right? It's the most important thing as we get through this. And, after that, I think the advice I have for customers is set yourselves up for a world where transforming digitally, remote work, bring your own device, cloud, it's the new norm. And I know that's a little bit maybe an exaggeration, but the reality is if your architecture and your strategy is not set up for the new norm, then it's going to be a competitive disadvantage for you. Because if you're in retail, all the online retailers are doing it. If you're in financial, all the financial institutions are quickly transforming to a security cloud. If you're in healthcare. And so I view it as competitive advantage. How do you make sure your people are productive? You save costs, you protect your data. And the reality is that necessitates transforming your on-premise security stack. And so, that's the advice I would have. Look at it from that business perspective. Don't be shy about, challenging maybe the norms of the past 10 years. And then, look, I would recommend go to a secure access services edge infrastructure. And we're happy to talk to them about it. We have, I don't know if you know this, but we have probably 15 former CISOs on staff who ran large security practices. And they're here really just to help people think about how do I transform my security stack? And we're happy to talk to them about that in a peer-to-peer manner. So.
Great. Hey, Sanjay, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I hope everyone's healthy, happy, safe in this situation, and my blessings to everybody. Okay, thank you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Wow, great show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. Some interesting conversations. That's going to wrap it up for today, Monday, June 15th. We'll be back tomorrow on the 16th, Tuesday, with another fresh show with some interesting interviews. Look forward to it, including some friends from CloudBees. So we'll have some of that. And that's it for today's show. Until then, I hope to see you tomorrow, but stay safe, stay well, stay strong, stay tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel.